for joining us on Off the Cuff ABQ. We have Santa Fe in the house. Eli in defense of Santa Fe. He's been on the show before.
Thanks for having me again.
The video's on the website, offthecuffabq.com. It's on the homepage. Go there, click it. That's part 1. And this is part 2 of your series.
Yeah, let's talk about part 2.
Yeah, let's catch everybody up to speed really quick, just in case they're just tuning in and they didn't hear the previous show.
Okay.
What is In Defense of Santa Fe? I know you're doing this collection of videos and interviews and all of this stuff as it relates to Hispanic culture and Santa Fe in general.
Yep, absolutely. So In Defense of Santa Fe is basically my perspective on things going on in our town, things going on in Santa Fe when it comes to cultures that don't need to be clashing and are being spurred on to clash by others. So you have basically, in my opinion, kind of new inflamed racism against the Hispanic culture in Santa Fe. And so in part 1, and this is so complex. I tried to do one video out of this whole thing,
and you can't.
I can't. Yeah,
you can't.
I was starting to put my script out, and I realized, okay, there's just no way. There's just too many moving parts here. There's just too many things going on. So what I did is I started and broke it up into 8 parts. So with the first one, I kind of established the series.
Right.
And I talked about Santa Fe, a little bit about history, not too much. I do that in some other videos. I started talking about the relationship that Santa Fe in general has had with our Native American brothers and sisters around us. And then I started talking about the protesters that have been coming to Santa Fe and protesting. Kind of started to establish things. In episode 2, I go into much greater detail when it comes to who's bringing these protests to our town.
Right.
I call it the opposition. So part 2 is called the opposition.
Okay.
So we go into, who these people are, what they're thinking, and they're not all the same.
So In Defense of Santa Fe part 2, we are discussing series 2 or video 2.
Correct. Yeah.
Opposition. In Defense of Santa Fe, the opposition or opposition.
Yeah, the opposition.
Right. And it's really difficult to navigate through all of these different groups because often you'll see these groups and they appear to mean very well.
That's right.
And then they it's like fish, line, and hook. And they fish hook you. And then they're like, oh, they're racist. And, and then they start making you see stuff that maybe isn't there. But at the end of the day, they were really hateful towards Hispanics, even though, for instance, some of these groups were supposed Native American ran, but they weren't even from here. They weren't even Pueblo Indians, things like this. And you break all of this down. I do my best to try and break it down. But you're absolutely right. And so what they've done is they've gone out of their way to deface things that are related to Spanish history and culture. For example, there is a statue of a priest outside one of the public buildings that they spray painted. They've spray painted the Cross of the Martyrs on multiple occasions. Have pictures of some of them, making obscene gestures in front of things related to Spanish culture or religion
or religion too. Some of this does get into religion because the Spanish history and the Catholic Church go hand in hand,
right?
And neither history is perfect, but it's not what they're claiming that it is. Just back to your point, as far as how they come across as doing good, a lot of these groups do come across as doing good, and they use catchphrases and words like freedom, liberation, justice, democracy, things like that. So when you look at them off the cuff, they're using these things that isn't going to be very controversial to really anybody that kind of looks at them. But as you get deeper and as you go on, you realize some of these groups are kind of nuts.
Absolutely.
I mean
some of them have manifestos clearly stated on their website. They say exactly who they stand in solidarity with.
Right.
Solidarity is a funny thing with these groups. Groups use solidarity. So I used to think once upon a time that maybe solidarity was better than unity because it's really hard to unite people.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you're marching, if you're at a protest, because both the left and the right, they protest. I mean,
Sure.
you got lizard people on one side and something else on the other. This is what they've been called, right?
Yeah.
So they go out to protest. They're just exercising their rights. But then they say something like, down, down with oppression, up with liberation. And you're like, down with oppression, up with liberation. Who could not stand behind that? Come on. Let's go get liberated.
Yep.
But often these groups pit minorities. If you call Hispanics minority in New Mexico, I don't. I've never saw myself as a minority. But as far as the rhetoric that people say, they pit minorities against immigrants, illegal immigrants, trying to make you feel like you're the same and that you have to go out there and fight for your rights. But the reality is the Constitution permits you to do all these things already.
Sure.
And these groups usually set up in major cities. And anytime there's something national going on, they use that as a vehicle.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, let's say for police brutality, just for instance. Somebody gets shot somewhere in the nation. They call all of these people out and they keep telling them over and over, they do this because you're colored. Oops, I mean person of color. Do you see how closely related that is?
Yep.
And people want to be involved. People want to get active. But then you start going to the meetings and then before you know it, it's like your whole world's turned upside down and you're really destroying your own culture.
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting because some of these groups do prey on people that are just looking for a home too. I mean, typically what I found with some of these groups is that and I'll just say Red Nation in particular, because I did a lot of looking into them. You have a lot of their leadership, which are pretty extreme. And then you have some leadership under that are pretty extreme too. But when you kind of trickle down, some of these people are just normal people that are just looking for a place to belong.
Right.
They're just looking for a group to fit in. There's a part of human nature that needs some camaraderie, that they need to feel part of a purpose, part of like they're feeling, like they're doing some good in the world.
Right.
And so, not all these members are necessarily bad people, but in my opinion, the top leadership, they are
the founders.
They are, in my opinion, a nefarious force, and they're coming against our culture. And so, part 2 is really where I focus on that coming and clashing with Santa Fe.
Right.
So so we had a riot there. Where did that come from? What were they thinking? What are they trying to do? What's their objective? Are they going to do this again? What are the different pieces of the puzzle here? What does our local leadership think of this? I get into that a little bit more in 3.
Right.
And so I kind of do my best to kind of go in there with a precision knife and kind of cut some of these things apart so that you can really see, okay, this is this person, this is this person.
Right.
And I'm naming names.
Right.
So I'm not just going in there and talking kind of vaguely
about this group or that group.
Right,
You're
exactly.
Saying this group.
I'm naming names.
Right.
I'm naming groups. I'm naming names. I'm naming individuals. And I'm talking about what they think, what they're quoted as saying. I even go into, some interviews that they've given, who's given those interviews.
Right.
And really, when it comes to Red Nation, the common denominator where they resolve after you piece away and strip away, I should say, all of the distraction words that we're talking about, like democracy and fighting for rights and stuff like that, is they're basically communists. They're communists.
Right.
They want to usher in communism.
Right.
Is what they want to do. They want to eliminate police completely.
Right.
And we're not talking restructuring police. I know there's been a lot of conversations across the country about, well, can we do policing better? And that's a fine question to ask. Right. And then you have this whole abolish the police movement and
ICE.
Yeah, and ICE, et cetera. And you kind of think, okay, well, that's kind of nuts. They take it a step further. So not only do they want to abolish police, I'm talking about zero police with zero alternatives. Right. They also want to abolish the jail system and any kind of punishment for lawbreakers. Gone. They don't even want child protective services around anymore. Why in the world would you make such strong statements about child protective services? Well, the answer is they don't want any accountability. Zero. And it's and one of the analogies I make in part 2 is they're kind of like a school bully on the playground.
Right.
Well, if you were to ask that 12-year-old bully who wants to beat up other kids and take what they have, if you ask them, what changes would you make to the school? Well, we don't think there should be teachers anymore.
Right. Or books.
And
or
we don't,
pencils.
Yeah, and that's what
or Wi-Fi.
And that's it's just they're doing that on a more sophisticated level.
Right.
But when you look at it and you break it all down and you boil that down to its irreducible minimum, it's ridiculous.
Yes.
And so there's no way you're going to sell ridiculous to the public unless you shroud it in clouds of justice and we're fighting for equity and stuff like that.
Right. Equaling or making the playing field equal or something. And I can see how a lot of people get caught up in this because you just turn on the news, social media, you see these people getting active out in their streets, things like this. And like, for instance, the Black Lives Matter movement, it's a hashtag. It started with the hashtag. It's a hashtag movement. But its founder has like 4 mansions now and is doing all this crazy stuff, which is fine because it's America. Go do what you're going to do because capitalism works. Because it works.
Yeah, we don't want capitalism, but at the same time, I'll take it from me personally.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like that sort of money making is a little different because it was off the backs of, people struggling and stuff. And as a result of that, Black Lives Matter asking for accountability for police brutality, police violence, all of this, because it exists. Yeah. It's real. But at the end of the day, they didn't really want that. They want any person who is shot or killed that is black, no matter what they were doing, to just evade accountability, and they want to burn the city down.
Right.
I've never understood that, Yeah. I remember the first time I went out, like in a protest, if you will, was when James Boyd in Albuquerque got shot. They shot and killed him on the mountain. Freaked me out. Saw it on TV.
I remember that. Yeah.
And so that was sort of my first encounter. And
that whole thing wasn't cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because most people saw it and was like, what?
Yeah.
And they felt like he got murdered. Cops went on trial. They've been acquitted or found not guilty. And so, so the story moves on. But, I felt compelled to go out and protest over that. And then as a result, I ended up writing stories, like these stolen lives stories from with family members who lost their loved ones as a result of a police shooting. Whether they were guilty or innocent or whatever, it wasn't the point. I was just going out there and like really figuring out what was happening. So during this time with James Boyd and all of this is where I met a lot of these groups. And so I was very eerie when, they were like here handing out their signs and stuff. And I remember the person I went with, went to grab a sign. It's on a stick and all this. And I said, maybe you shouldn't hold the sign because we don't know what the hell it really says.
Yep.
Because it has a .com on there.
Right. What are you advertising?
What am I advertising? Because when they're taking pictures, you'll see them big yellow signs.
Yeah.
And it's like, no justice, no peace. Go to www. Right?
Yep.
It's advertising.
Yep.
And so I saw Red Nation following that pattern as well. They were the exact same signs, except they were now red, not orange or yellow, whatever color they are, with their .com.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a lot of times what they do is they'll and again, I go over this in detail in my In Defense of Santa Fe Part 2, but they do 2 common strategies. Strategy number 1 is feed off of an existing social network that will provide you with protesters, or go find them. Right. Even if you have to pay them, that money's there, and bust them into your community to make it appear as if this has got a lot more local support than it really does. So there's number 1. Okay, so there was, I think between 200 to 300 protesters in Santa Fe. The overwhelming majority of those people were not from Santa Fe.
Right.
The second thing they do is they do tap local people, local activists that do agree with them for faces. And what they're trying to do is smoke and mirrors to number 1, present to the community as if this is a local grassroots movement when it's not.
Right.
And then number 2, if they can't do that, then intimidate the local community into saying, wow, we've got all these protesters. This isn't the way we want our town. We're Santa Fe. We don't want people, coming here doing this kind of a thing. And so what do they want? Maybe we should just give it to them.
Right.
You know
Make it go away.
Make it go away. Make it go away.
So we saw this happen when they wanted to remove the traditional crowning of the little Reina and the little Don Diego de Vargas in the schools. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of like their first push. That's where I met you, I believe.
Yeah. That's where we went.
Was in the Santa Fe County meeting. And then not more than a year later, then La Entrada was just gone.
Yep.
And so they started there. Mm-hmm. And we knew that day they weren't going to stop. Right. They weren't going to stop. And there was nobody there but like one person.
Yep.
Or like three people, against it. And I remember seeing the whole board and they were like, poor these Native Americans, look what's happened to them. And then they try to compare us with some state in the dirty South with the KKK, like it became that. And I was thinking like, who convinced them of this, number one? And number two, like, when was it that we didn't get along with the Native Americans? Like, that's what probably hurt me the most. Right. Was like, I didn't even know we had a problem.
Right. Well, by and large, we don't.
I mean, we don't.
By and large, we don't.
Right.
Now, I understand that the plaque on the side of the obelisk that was downtown was offensive to some Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And I think that being the case, that should have been changed. Mm-hmm. And I think it should have been an agreement between both, cultural leaders in both the Hispanic communities and the Native American community should have got together and say, okay, this is offensive to our brothers. What should we say there instead?
Right.
How can we consider what that monument is supposed to be, the intent of the monument, and let's swap that plaque out.
Right. And let's do it now.
Take in an afternoon.
Right.
But no, instead we have to tear that thing down and everything else.
Right. Right. And it wasn't Native Americans who tore it down. It wasn't Hispanics who tore it down.
No.
They appeared to be non-color.
Yeah. Right.
Non-color.
And I go over that again in my video, and we're talking about specific names. I even talk about where some of these people are from. Mm-hmm. And I also talk about what some of our local universities are doing to encourage this, because there are professors at some of these local universities, especially UNM, that have professors that are either part of these extremist groups or encourage them.
Right.
So
we
go there too.
Yeah, it's sort of a script that they almost have to follow. So we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to KDAZ 96.9 FM, 700 AM. This is Off the Cuff. We're sitting here with Eli in defense of Santa Fe. He has an 8-part series that Off the Cuff is covering about the destruction of Santa Fe, the Santa Fe riots as it pertained to Hispanic culture and the Hispanic racism that is happening in Santa Fe under local government. Yeah, I think his name's Mayor Weber. Maybe we'll cut that out. I don't know. Weber, we're coming for you. Just kidding. Don't say that. Cut it out. Somebody take her to commercial. Can you switch the switch to commercial? I'm going to say something about Weber and his snowflake justice. Hey everybody, welcome back to Off the Cuff ABQ. We're here today with In Defense of Santa Fe, the videographer, the interviewer, the guy making all of the videos. It's an 8-part series. Eli Bransford, thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Always have a blast talking to you, Dinah.
So you drove from Santa Fe over here. We're covering this on the radio. We're going to put your video up on offthecuffabq.com, but you have a platform too. Where can people find you directly?
I do. It's basically my primary is my YouTube channel, and it's basically Eli Bransford. You can either just search that, or you can just search, and it doesn't have to be on YouTube, although, go to YouTube and search it, or you can even go to Bing or Google and just search In Defense of Santa Fe, and it'll come up.
Okay.
I do have a secondary backup on BitChute, just because YouTube can be kind of funny sometimes. So
cancel culture or something like this. They're going to cancel Hispanics in Santa Fe. I say, well, what the hell are you guys going to do? Change the name of Santa Fe?
Yeah, actually, they do want to do that.
I know they want to do that, and I've been covering that regularly on the show. And when I say that out loud, we had Janice Arnold-Jones. We have her on Taco Tuesdays. She usually doesn't bring tacos, but that's a different episode. So when I told her about this, she said, no way. And I'm like, no, seriously, it's
Yep.
the city of faith.
Yep.
It's the city of faith, and they want to. Who wants to change it?
Okay, so that's a good question.
Or is that episode 3?
No, not really.
Okay.
That's really just these activist groups.
Yes.
So what they do is they make a pretty decent living, and they make a lot of noise just feeling victimized.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do want to, they are horribly offended by, many of them are horribly offended by anything that is a representation of Spanish culture and
Right.
history. And they want to repaint it all as bad. And
Right.
of course, it's mixed. Nothing's that simple.
Well, and again, not excusing history, but history does say it was a little violent. History says it was violent.
Yep.
We're okay with that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it was 500 years ago.
Right. One of the things about the history of Santa Fe to me that really hits me is that you're right. History in general was extremely violent.
Right.
But when you look at the history of Santa Fe, it was a turn of events when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
Santa Fe, the roots of where Santa Fe came from, was turning that and redoing things. It's kind of like where you see some of the fruits of all of the fights of the past, those lessons actually coming to fruition, and cultures actually snapping and making adjustments and learning.
Right.
That is something that should be celebrated.
And that's what I thought we always did with La Entrada. See what I mean? And
Right.
so then, this Red Nation, these other groups come in and they have the solidarity support, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll bust in anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then they, on their platform, it says to decolonize. So
Mm-hmm.
if you research what decolonization means,
It's not a metaphor.
it's not a metaphor. It means to remove you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or to remove whoever it is that they're trying to decolonize. And in that instance, it would be you and I.
Yeah, exactly.
Mostly you.
Right.
Because of your videos.
Mostly. They're going to kick me out. So I go over this as well. And
Right.
so I go through one of the founders of Red Nation and what she says talking around the country, and also what one of the sites that she is an editor at says. And there's actually articles on that. One of them is called Decolonization is Not a Metaphor. And when you start reading that and you get in there, they're actually discussing, almost like fantasizing about how it's going to be when they kick everybody out of areas that they feel that they historically
Are
deserve or are entitled
yeah.
to, and how it's not their problem where these people go.
Right.
And the fact that, they're fantasizing about kicking people out of their homes,
Right.
and kicking people out of their areas. Who cares that you bought that house and have a mortgage to it?
Mm-hmm.
Who cares that you maybe have a family that has lived on a plot of land for 100 years? It doesn't matter. They want to kick you out.
Right.
And they actually talk about details about how they're going to feel about doing that, and basically telling each other, well, that's not our problem because
Right.
they settled on land that's ours. Which brings us to one of the irreducible minimums of what they want to do. How many times have you seen hashtag land back, or land back spray painted on something in Santa Fe or Albuquerque, or even in Portland? They're talking about land back, and they're talking about, basically they're referring to, okay, so Native Americans in their minds were here first. That's actually not true, but they've been here much longer than pretty much everybody else. So they feel that they have the right to all of the land of the Americas today, in today's world. So forget about other people that have migrated here. Their migration here is the only one that counts.
Right.
And so I go into that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know if it's still there because it's been many moons since I've gone on the website, and I have only been on there like once or twice, and I couldn't believe what I was reading.
I know.
I was just like what the hell does that mean? Decolonize. And so, but when you hear them talk about colonizers, particularly to persons of color, colored people, they say to Hispanics and Indians and Native Americans and all of these groups to decolonize. But when they're actually speaking of it, it almost sounds like they're not talking about us or Hispanics or anything like this. Almost like they're talking about the white man, because it's always been the white man.
Right.
And then, when you start talking about European ancestry. They bring that up. It's exactly to remove you, to decolonize you. And then what about what's going to happen to all the white people following them? I mean, where do they go?
See, none of this stuff.
Do they get to stay? Yeah. Or because they, were in Santa Fe destroying all of our stuff?
Right.
What a bunch of little brats, I was saying. I cannot believe they just got off with the slap on the wrist for having destroyed something.
I know, I agree. It's crazy that, you can go into a town, attack some of the most historical things of that town,
right,
and then go through the legal system. The police go out of their way to have all of the evidence and all the facts there, and it just nothing happens to it. So it's sad.
Yeah.
But back to what you were saying, like what happens to all the people, the Spanish people are the ultimate, or were the ultimate colonizers. They were. They came to the Americas first, and they were the most aggressive at exploring. And so the Hispanic people, word Hispanic is even an interesting word because, that really wasn't around into the 70s.
Right.
I guess to be more accurate, I would say people of Spanish descent.
Right. Right.
Because the Spanish, were so aggressive at exploring, and so to them we're the ultimate colonizers. But I was listening to a professor in a debate recently, and he was making the argument that all of this land needs to be reverted back to people of Native American descent. And it's just such a, it's not a well thought out idea or argument, because let's just introduce two realities. Okay. Reality number one, Native Americans are not all the same. Indians are not all the same. You had various tribes, and you even had people groups that were here before they were. Okay. So Native American Indians, you have Comanches, you have Apaches, you have the Pueblo people. These are not the same.
Right.
These are not the same. They have their own identities. And so you can take, I can show you a plot of land on a map, and I can show you it belonged to this tribe during this era, a different tribe during this era, a different tribe during this era, a different people group even before all of that.
Right.
Okay. And then the Spanish came and colonized. Now, most of the time what colonization looked like, and there were exceptions to this, but most of the time what colonization looked like is it was families. It was women and children coming to build communities. It wasn't like it was just this massive group of soldiers and armies that leveled everything in front of them.
Right.
Did that happen? Maybe, sure, a little bit, but by and large it was just families.
Right.
So question number one, how far back do you go if you're going to say that you're going to give that land back to people? Do you go back 200 years? Do you go back 400 years? How about 5? How about 6? How about 1,000? Because you're going to get a different owner of that land depending on how far back you go. That's problem number one. Problem number two, evidence that the Hispanic ancestors were not racist was that they were the first ones to intermarry with Native American Indians. And that was encouraged by Spain because they looked at Native Americans as equal human beings.
Right.
All right. And so you now have mixed race people. We've created a new race, okay, between the Spanish descendants and Native American people. And so you have cross-pollination of different DNA, which for now hundreds of years, for the most part, goes back so far. Even some recent DNA genetic studies that they've done of some individuals that felt strongly that they were 100% Native American and found out that actually they do have Spanish DNA in them. It's just way further back than they realized. Right. So problem number one, how far back do you go? Problem number two, well, what are you calling a pure bloodline anymore? Right. Because if you're going to give this back to Native American people, you're giving it back to people who have largely been intermingled with the Spanish for the longest time. So it gets so fuzzy. It gets so foggy. So that land back thing, really, there's just zero chance. There's just zero way that you can actually even come close to a conversation
Yes.
of making that a reality.
Right.
Even if everyone wanted to do that, there's just no way that could become a reality without doing 100 times more harm to people living today.
So then it again begs the question, like, why would that group exist? Because you'd have to have a blueprint for a whole other kind of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So forget about the one world and we're all in this together and we share among each other or something like this. What's going to happen when that doesn't really work out? Is that really their main goal, or is it really communism? Because see, again, what I noticed with all of these groups, and there's a ton of them. Most of the 501c3s are little commie groups, at least over here.
Right.
So it begs to question what these groups are really, what their true intent is. Because if it's communism, that's pretty easy, because I feel like a lot of them are just waiting for the collapse of the United States, and they got these little chapters and they're already set up. You know this because when they call a protest, they all end up, at least in Albuquerque, in front of the UNM bookstore. That's where you go for the protest.
Right.
Everybody, they got everybody trained, right? Another police shooting, head down to UNM bookstore. We're going to burn down the whole damn town or something, or at least downtown. And is it really that they want to empower, to liberate Native Americans or Pueblo Indians, and in particular here in New Mexico? Why would you want all of this to be Indian land? Have you seen the Pueblos? Have you seen some of the reservations? What about all these damn casinos? Like, are there going to be casinos there? Are they going to get back to the Native American people? I don't know. I think that, maybe that group isn't really there for the liberation of indigenous people.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. They're opportunists,
right?
And they're using something that they think and that they feel they can get people to rally around and to get behind to try to gain notoriety and ultimately power and influence.
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Yeah, so that's what it is. It's opportunism, but
right.
And one of the points that I make in my video, and starting to allude to kind of what you're getting to. That if you follow any of their claims, any of the things that they say that they want to do, you follow that long enough and you realize that you've gotten far past the boundary of ridiculous.
Right.
And so you have to conclude by saying, okay, these things are never going to happen. They're just never going to happen.
Right.
I mean, something would have to wildly change in our world for this stuff to happen. So what's realistic? What's actually going to happen? Well, the likely continuation of just making noise and causing trouble in our communities. What's happening now is likely to just continue. So they're likely to come back to Santa Fe and just tear down more historical things.
Right, because they've all been encouraged to do so, and there's no accountability.
Exactly. So they're not going to get their prize. They're not going to get what they want. But what are they going to destroy on the way to their eventual failure? So they're eventually going to fade into obscurity. They are. These groups always come and go. They don't usually have long lifespans. And so what's going to happen between now and when they fade into obscurity? Well, they're just going to continue to do the same thing. So I don't want our community to have any more damage to it. I don't want any more protests there. I don't want anything else there. That begs the question, well, what are the elected leaders doing about this?
What are they doing?
What are the police doing about this?
Right.
Because the elected leaders in Santa Fe largely are very sympathetic to these groups. Very.
Why is that?
I think that part of that is a trend across the country.
It's a trend.
I think part of it's a trend across the country, and I'm going to get to that a little bit more specifically in a later series. But the whole idea that who we are is bad, the whole idea that the founding of our country and any Europeans that came here were bad, a negative force, were evil, and that we now have to look at our history with guilt instead of pride.
Right.
That whole trend, which is housed on the extreme progressive side of the left.
Right.
They feel that way, and so I think that that's kind of there. So what I want to do is I want to speak out about this so that people can at least see my perspective and consider it. And consider that when we decide who we're going to vote for, because we need to vote for leaders who see this for what it is and are not going to have any tolerance for it.
Right.
Let alone agree with them.
Right.
About, actually, the historical things are all bad. We should go ahead and tear them all down. What they're doing is they're erasing our historical fingerprint, and that is precious to a large majority of the citizens of Santa Fe.
But consider our history, La Entrada. I mean, was it not something that you loved to go to because it was what it was, with other Native Americans, with the Pueblo Indians, with us, our old ways of doing things? My grandmother used to trade with some Indians down there, tortillas for this and this for that. And that's what she did. Like, it was a whole week long kind of thing. And you always went with grandma up to Santa Fe because it was going to be a good time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then you'd get ribbon braided in your hair and all of these kinds of celebration. I never went to La Entrada and was like, soy la conquistadora, you know, like a lunatic or something like this, right?
Yeah.
It was just something that we've always done. But voting in somebody that represents Santa Fe is going to be very, very important, because I look at Weber, and I know we're going to get into this season or series 3, your video 3, but this guy has been here less than 4 years as mayor, less than 4 years.
Yeah.
And he's going to change the name of Santa Fe. Where are all the Hispanics in Santa Fe? What are they doing? Are they registered to vote? Are they voting? Are they just are they just voting for Democrats for the sake of voting for Democrats? Because the outsiders that have come in,
right,
from California, from wherever, all of these non-colored liberals, call them progressive, socialist, liberal, Democrat. They're infiltrators of this party, of the Democratic Party. I think, this is my opinion, at least it's the opinion of this show. And 4 years. They come with voting habits. Hispanic people need to start voting, I don't know what, or get out and go and stand in defense of Santa Fe.
Yeah, they need to start voting values.
Right.
And I don't necessarily think this on a national level, but I do think when it comes to a local level,
right,
I think that the D and the R don't matter nearly as much anymore. I think you really need to find out who the person is,
absolutely,
and their values.
Right.
Where are you from? What have you done? What are your values?
Right.
And vote for the one that's closer aligned to yours, rather than just going in there blindly and seeing the D and saying, okay, that's a good guy. Not anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah, it just amazes me that, you know, somebody who's not even from here, these people aren't even us, and we allowed them to just take it down. And then if we show up over there, we're going to be the violent ones, the violent conquerors of 500 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the press was going to be bad, all of this kinds of stuff. But what is it that we are doing? Or are we just going to allow all of this to take place and us sit down and do absolutely nothing? Because, you know, progressives, socialists, liberals, all of these 501c3 social and political justice groups, they want snowflake justice. They want child molesters, murderers out of jail, further victimizing you, or they want the whole damn world to call you a person of color as though you're not born a free American. And if you're Hispanic, you're a product of yourself.
Yep.
I mean, we made ourselves, we were here established before the 13 colonies, and we were here before this was United States of America. We've always been an American. And so often I think they equally try to make you see that, or try to make you see, or give you the illusion that you're less than, and everything that happens to you is a result of racism. So you got to go out and flood your street, tear down this statue, tear down that statue, because that's going to make your condition better.
Right.
You know, like, you know, what's happening. And meanwhile, in Santa Fe, everything's changing. In New Mexico, it's one of the worst places to raise a family because of child abuse, repeat offenders, all of this kinds of stuff that we now have to deal with on top of all of this social justice warrior nonsense. I could see if they really went out and did something for the community.
Right.
Made the conditions better for Native Americans.
Sure.
You know, I don't know, let's get on a committee to have running water.
Yeah, I see.
Things like this,
things like that going on, I would be there with my cameras endorsing that, and trying to get community help for that.
Right. But instead, they just keep pounding away at this idea that you're less than because you're a person of color, and that you're too dumb to know any better, you're too stupid to know any better, and all of this stuff is for you, and you should just fall in line and get on with it. But now that all of this stuff is down in Santa Fe, and they're, desecrating statues of Catholic priests and things like this, what would it look like if Hispanic people, or not even, because it wasn't even all the time Indians doing this, what if that was to be said about Native Americans, and they were going and destroying pueblos and stuff like that? I would be one of the first to be highly upset about it.
Me too. I would be there with my cameras, and I'd be doing a whole video series on why that's bad.
Right.
Hispanic people of Hispanic descent, and Native American Indians, we're brothers.
Right.
We're brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
We may not all see it that way all the time. We may not even, acknowledge that because we're just living our lives, but we have been in a symbiotic relationship once we learned how to live peacefully with each other 400 plus years ago. And what happens to one of us affects the other. We have a symbiotic relationship. We have to defend that relationship, both sides of this, because you never know what the future is going to hold. It may very well be in the future, not in the very long future, that people are coming, against Native Americans for whatever reason.
Right.
And when that happens, the Spanish culture needs to stand up and defend them. It needs to happen on both sides.
Right.
Because
Hispanics need to stand up right now and defend themselves, because what these people are doing, they're moving on us hard. Weber is, likely going to be the next mayor of Santa Fe unless something dramatic happens, and it has to happen. It has to happen, Santa Fe. Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Albuquerque too.
Amen.
I mean, look what's happening here. And so we're just getting pushed out. They're pitting us against other minorities as though we are not here 5,000 years as if we're other people.
Yeah.
And then they're teaching your kids at school, if they're at school age right now, that they're persons of color and that the whole damn system is broke and it's systemically racist. Because critical race theory, you got to be critical of something, and that's religion.
Yeah, it is a form of religion.
That's whiteness and all of this stuff, but yet nothing but white people.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like to me in the paper.
Yep.
And it looked like a duck, talk like a duck, walk like a duck. It was a duck.
Yep.
And they just let them do it.
Yep.
It boils my blood, I tell you. Like every time I'm just like,
yeah, me too. Well, that's why I'm doing a video series.
No, I know.
I'm busy, man. I have a job. I have kids. I have a family. I want to play guitar.
Yeah,
that's what I want to do.
Totally.
I'm working on an album right now. That's what I want to be doing. But this is just bothering me to the point where I don't want to be the person anymore that just sits on the sidelines and complains.
Right.
I want to do something productive. I want to do something that's going to be a net positive for my community. So I'm taking the time to do this.
Right. Well, one thing's for sure, nobody can ever say you didn't do anything because you did.
Well, you as well.
No, seriously, because everybody has to be involved in this to different degrees, different capacities. So I do radio, and that's where we exist, Off the Cuff exist, because New Mexicans have been ignored. You're in Santa Fe. Anytime there's anything of history, La Entrada, whatever's going on, I know to call you, because if you weren't an expert before, you definitely are now, because you went out and you did the work.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes. And a lot of these groups, they don't go out and do the work. They probably don't even know what the conditions are on actual reservations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're so privileged.
Yeah.
Because they're so privileged.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. In part one, I talked about a social media page by one Native American who was making that point. Mm-hmm. And she was saying, you guys want to go to Santa Fe and knock down monuments? How about you come to the Pueblos and help feed us?
Right.
Feed the people in need. Mm-hmm. How about you volunteer to do things to better our community instead of tearing things down?
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's never ending, and you have to ask yourself, like, who put them in charge to speak for you? Mm-hmm. Even if you are oppressed, who gives them the right to speak on behalf of you?
Right, and there gets into another point that I make, and I make it in 1 and 2, is that these protesters and these groups that are protesting are making themselves at odds and showing aggression against the true, legitimate Native American leadership.
Right.
Is what they're doing, because they're stealing the spotlight. They're stealing the microphone. They're the ones that are out protesting. Meanwhile, most of, at least to my knowledge, most of these Native American actual official leadership, most of these governors are not cool with this.
Right.
They're not. But these groups are attempting to take their voice away by being louder.
Right.
By being, getting more attention, by tearing things down, by getting the news.
Right.
And
somebody take the microphone away from the protester. Get the bullhorn away from the protester.
Yeah.
¿Qué queremos? Justicia. ¿Cuándo? Ahora. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. You know what no justice, no peace means?
Tell me.
It means if there's no justice, there can be no peace.
Mm-hmm.
Like that means you have to burn it all down. And the first time I showed up to a protest and they were like, no justice, no peace, I showed up because I'm a matchmaker. Showed up with the book of matches and everyone's all, whoa, Dinah, you can't be violent over there. And I was like, well, you said no justice, no peace. So that means, no justice, no peace. But,
Wow.
if you have peace, you actually have justice. There's this a prayer by Mother Teresa, and it says, the fruit of silence is prayer, and the fruit of prayer is faith. Two different things. But once you are faithful, you could then have love, like real love, not like being in love or I love that but love.
Sure.
And from love, you can serve. And when you serve your community, you serve your house first. And then you serve your neighbors, and then you serve your community. You don't come here from another state and parachute in and be like, oh, I know what's good for all these brown people. They so dumb and brown.
Yeah.
They're people of color. They're colored people. They're minorities. They're oppressed. The whole system's racist against them. And I have what you call white guilt. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Who the hell calls themselves white in New Mexico? I always thought they were Anglos. I'm totally confused now. But if you have the fruit of service, then you will have the fruit of peace.
I agree.
And you need no justice, because that peace in itself is justice.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you end up like, snowflake justice. Santa Fe. Come on.
And you tend to love what you work for too.
Right.
You tend to love what you work for, what you sacrifice for. And so you're right. When you're taking the approach of, serving at at homeless shelters, when you're taking the approach of, fixing someone's car for free because they can't afford it.
Right.
Or when you're taking, the approach of, downtown is a mess. Instead
Right.
of calling the city and complaining, I think I'm going to get a few friends and I think I'm going to go down there with some trash bags and clean this place up.
Right.
You tend to get a totally different perspective on your community, and you tend to care about it a heck of a lot more.
Totally.
And then you see people coming in, they don't want to do that. They ain't picking up trash. They just want to tear your stuff down.
In fact, they came here to litter.
Yeah.
Yep.
They want to tear your stuff down because they think it's bad. It's like, I don't think so, guys.
And all of this is a time before they could understand.
Yeah.
Before a time that probably wasn't even theirs,
Yeah. And the funny thing here is, and it's something that has given me a little bit of hope, because when you look across the country, things are so polarized. Things are so divided. You've got, tribalism to the max when it comes to, Democrats and Republicans and all that kind of thing. I think that this issue, at least a lot of the people that I interview and that I've worked with on my series, that I've grouped together with, they're all over the political spectrum.
Right.
Now, there's no extreme progressives because obviously we're in a disagreement with them. But I'm friends with conservative Republicans. I'm friends with Democrats. And we can largely come together and say, we may have some disagreements on what maybe tax rates should be,
right,
or how many social programs we should run for this or that,
right,
or maybe we have a different disagreement on who should be president right now or something like that.
Right.
But when it comes to our local community, we see things pretty darn close,
right,
and that's encouraging to me.
Right,
that's encouraging because we've lost that.
Right.
We've lost that to a large degree, I think.
Yeah, totally. I had always saw New Mexico that way. I had never saw it any other way. And I would say in the last maybe 5 years where you can see it full on, maybe even a little longer, like 6 or 7 years, I saw these groups and they're very prevalent here in Albuquerque. And like I said, I've encountered them. I know of these people. I've seen them face to face. I did grassroots media and stuff. And hell, I even rented an office space here at one of these 501c3s, but at the end of the day, I would just observe these people and I couldn't believe my own eyes. I mean, it's a whole other show in itself. But these people are not for you or me.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
At all.
Right.
At all. They want to pervert your minds. They want to give you some other kind of idea and then act like communism, socialist is such a big thing that's going to fix us all.
Yeah,
and it's not.
No, they should read some history books.
Totally.
And go try living in Cuba.
Or you know what? Get the hell out of New Mexico. Seriously. Go far away.
The only people alive on the planet that think that communism is good are the ones that have never actually lived through it.
Right.
That's
right.
I mean,
if you've ever talked to a Cuban from Cuba,
right,
he'll tell you. Actually, all you got to do is see that one movie, Scarface, when he's like, man, I got octopus coming out of my ears, right? I work 8, 10, 12 hours a day. You own nothing. You have nothing. You got nothing.
Yeah.
So that's communism. Socialism is just like that, that stage in between capitalism and like communism. It's like the transition period. Where
it is, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I've brought up plenty of times that exact point. They have to graduate this in because who would actually go for this, right? And so they have to graduate it in. But one of the things is that Red Nation is so open about this. It's like they talk about socialism being a transition to capitalism. I'm like, oh gosh, you guys are saying the quiet part out loud. You guys need to learn how to I guess if they're trying to manipulate, they're not doing a great job of it. It's like, you guys are saying the quiet part out loud, like right there, like.
Right, because I doubt most people even go there. It's like, hey, go pick up that sign over there and let's go burn down Albuquerque. Let's go bust windows downtown Albuquerque, tear down history in Santa Fe, and disrespect the whole damn state. Yeah. Come on, New Mexico. We've got to vote in better. We can do better. And even though our politicians aren't directly like calling these people and saying, hey, do this, they kind of are in a certain way. I mean, like you want to look at Alan Weber, and we'll get into more of this in the future, but when you have a mayor of a city who basically says that he agrees with some of their base philosophies, attempts to take some of these historic things away, and fails, and then you have these groups coming and continuing, picking up the ball where he left off, I'm sorry, it's kind of both your fault. Right.
It really is. It's kind of both your fault. How about we have a mayor that says, look, we understand there's different sides, and we can have a conversation, but we're not tearing the historic stuff down.
Right.
Can we add more? Sure, we can add more. Can we, evolve as a city?
Right.
Absolutely. I'm not arguing for zero change, but coming in here and knocking all the historic stuff down that all harms one demographic, and that is the Hispanic people.
Right. It's racism against Hispanics, period.
Right. Exactly. Because that's what's being targeted. And mark my words, they're coming for the church next.
Oh, absolutely. They're coming for that church next.
They're coming for the church next.
Absolutely.
And by the time that becomes mainstream, a lot of people are going to say, where did that come from? Where is this coming from? And I'm saying now is the wake-up call. Now is the time to wake up and to realize what's happening. I know we're all busy. I know that we're all living lives. I know that we're going to work in the day or we're visiting our family. Now is the time. Now is the time to speak up. Now is the time to share videos online and be aware of what's happening. Now is the time to go to the polls and say, okay, who really has my values? I'm actually going to take the time to research and see who shares my values rather than just going in there and voting D like, my dad did and my grandfather before me, all of that. We really need to wake up and take the time and start affecting our community.
Right.
Time to be lazy, and I'm speaking to myself as well. Those days are over.
Absolutely, because I mean they're coming for it. Like right now, they're having some meeting at their little commie place, whatever. How I see it in my mind. It's like, hey, commie meeting today at 3:30 on Zoom.
Yeah.
Because I'm in California at the beach.
Right.
In my fourth mansion. They started a hashtag.
Yeah.
So, ¿qué queremos?
Yeah.
Justicia. Or maybe it's just peace.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
I don't even know what justice is, because if that's justice, no thank you. If justice is letting all the criminals out of jail, no thank you.
Totally.
Yeah. And really, what are you going to do without the police? It's only going to burden everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah.
And this is really their goals. So they jump on any single cause because at some point, somewhere in the world or the United States, something is going down. And then they say, hey, call to action.
Yeah.
UNM, front of the bookstore, right there.
Yeah.
UNM district.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to go down. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So what do people have to do aside from get registered to vote and all of this stuff? How are you going to defend Santa Fe?
Number one, bringing awareness.
Okay.
Bringing awareness so that the average community member, that has a little bit of time here or there,
right,
to check out my videos can at least have my perspective.
Right.
And I'll bet you 99% of the time my perspective is going to be more informed than what they have.
Right. You go into great detail.
Yeah, not because I'm like some, super smart guy, just because I've taken the time to look into this.
And all you have to do is look.
And all I'm doing is trying to explain this and package it in a way where people can spend a little bit of my time watching these videos, at least factually learn some things. Understand the perspective of a native Santa Fean.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say native, that has offended some people, but I'm from Santa Fe. My dad's from Santa Fe. My grandparents are from Santa Fe. I have Native American blood going through my veins. I have Spanish blood going through my veins. And I have just gringo blood going through my veins too. I am the product of a tri-culture city. Mm-hmm. And I have roots and I have a horse on all sides of this game.
Right.
And I've done my best to try and figure out and get to the bottom of what's happening. And then I'm doing my best to put a video series together to explain that to everybody else.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, because you're a great example of what it means to serve your community. So beyond just going out and encouraging, unrest in somebody, you've provided these, you put together these videos. They're called In Defense of Santa Fe. You can find them on YouTube under Eli Bransford, or just Google In Defense of Santa Fe, or go to offthecuffabq.com. It's on the homepage. Check it out. Look what's happening. Look around you. Where are people moving? How are you moving? And what is it that we are doing? Because if it's going to be absolutely nothing, then what are we doing? Throwing in the white towel or what?
Yeah, and I will give you just one more what can people do right now. A lot of what's been fueled in Santa Fe has come either directly or indirectly from UNM. Mm-hmm. If there's one thing that I could just say off the top of my head right now that people could do, would be to write UNM, write their president, write the upper management of UNM, email them, and make sure that they are aware of the fact that some of their professors are encouraging radical behavior that is adversely affecting their neighboring communities.
Right, absolutely.
A lot of these kids that were vandalizing our plaza were students at UNM. I understand that universities are supposed to be a place where diversity of thought is accepted, and I'm cool with that. Mm-hmm. But when their thoughts start to, and their philosophies and their professors are firsthand encouraging and organizing their students to go to neighboring communities and vandalize those communities, it's time that UNM hears from us.
Right.
It's time that we write them and talk to them and say, hey, you guys, do you have a standard for this? Do you have a standard for this? Because social media has kicked off some of these professors.
Right.
But UNM isn't. Do you address that at all? Or is the University of New Mexico totally cool with their with some of their professors organizing riots
Right.
and going to their neighboring communities.
Absolutely.
Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
We need to voice that. So if you're listening on the radio right now and you're thinking, well, what could I do right now when I get home and just take 5 or 10 minutes to do it? Do that.
Yep. Contact the UNM Board of Regents. Do that. Do it today. Put pressure on that board because it's the governing board. That board has appointed membership, and it's going to do whatever it wants until it has pressure not to.
Why would we send our kids there?
Right. Why would you?
I've got 3 kids right now. Why would I send any of them? Why would I send any of them to UNM right now when I know that they're just going to teach them to hate their own culture and where they came from? Oh, and by the way, let's go organize and tear something else down in Santa Fe.
Let's go burn down the city.
Yes.
No justice, no peace.
Right.
So contact your UNM Board of Regents. Let them know how you feel. Get involved. Start in your own home. Organize there. Ensure that you are registered to vote. And then your family members, and then your neighbors, and then the neighborhood you live in, your neighbors. Real simple.
Yep.
And then your city, and then your state. Other than that, you're really not working in the spirit of having peace. So Santa Fe, New Mexico, this is a shout out to you. Call us if you need us. You know we're here. We'll call you if we need you because it's kind of tough over here too in Albuquerque with all of this progressive, socialist, communist, liberal nonsense, garbage. It's not our way. It never has been our way. New Mexico is in a state that's really super racist. I've never thought so. I mean, I'm just like astounded with all of this stuff. So it's our state, it's our city, it's our life. We should take it back. We should stand in defense of Santa Fe. We should start there. We should start with the oldest capital in the world or in the United States.
Oldest capital city in the continental United States.
There you go. In defense of Santa Fe, we should start there. That's the city of faith. God bless Santa Fe, New Mexico. God bless you, Eli, and all that you do. Call UNM Board of Regents. Do it now. Do it today. Come on, New Mexico. Come on up. You're listening to KDAZ 96.9 FM, 700 AM. Don't forget to visit us at offthecuffabq.com. We exist because New Mexicans have been ignored. In our pursuit, we're looking to rise up unashamed to proclaim our faith, family, and freedom. We'll see you next round.
Dinah, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to talk about Weber next time, right?
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a
do
ton
it.
of fun.
Let's do it.
I'm going to bring everybody. All right.
All right.
Bye.